So I was actually wondering whether to have you or not on the podcast because I saw some of your stuff. I was like, oh, this guy's quite abrasive, I suppose. And then I watched more of your stuff and saw some other interviews you did, and I saw, okay, yeah, it's a bit of like a character and a bit of, I guess, it's a clickbaity, maybe a bit to try and get people to laugh and stuff. But I thought you had some interesting perspectives, and I had some questions. So here we are, Bart Kay. Thanks for joining me.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. Yes, and I promise not to say any naughty words.
Okay. Could you start with like an introduction for anyone who doesn't know you, about who you are and your qualifications, etc.?
Sure. I worked in academia for just over 2 decades. In 3 different areas throughout my career I specialized in. I kind of moved around a bit. I started out in the physiology of rest and exercise, sport and exercise science, if you like, human physiology. From there, I did a spell teaching and researching human nutrition for a bit. And then, for some reason, probably because I wasn't really enjoying the nutrition thing at that stage because of what was being taught and all of that, I said, well, let's go and do some cardiovascular pathophysiology instead, which, for anyone that doesn't know, is about heart disease, atherosclerosis, how that all ties in. And then at the end of an academic year, not too many years ago, I said to myself, that's sufficient now. I think we'll pull stumps. We'll say time, gentlemen, and I'll go and be a YouTube influencer doing my own thing because, well, they weren't enjoying what I was doing and I wasn't enjoying what they were doing. And so it was good. It was mutually acceptable terms. So here I am.
Yeah, cool. And I know some people have kind of questioned your training, I suppose, but I've had a little dig and I found if you go to this, at least from Google Scholar, I've published 20 papers, 200 citations, lecture at Du Montfort Uni in the UK. From your LinkedIn, worked at Massey University and educated at Fairfield College. Is there anything you want to add to that? Because I know certain
not really. I'm not of any mind to sit here and espouse my academic curriculum vitae, other than to confirm it's real, it's significant, it's out there, it's a matter of public record for anybody that wants to spend more than 3 seconds actually looking for it. You won't have found everything, of course, because you didn't do a comprehensive search, and you might need a bit more information to get absolutely everything. But a few of the things you mentioned there are indeed things that are a part of my employment history. So yes, a lot of people say it's all made up, that he's playing characters. Well, yes, I am playing characters on YouTube, and yes, I am doing it for clicks. I'm not even hiding that. It's not even, everybody knows that you need some point of difference. So early on in my YouTube career, I used being very, very abrasive, swearing a lot, and it had an effect. It worked. It seems to have got me attention that I otherwise wouldn't have. The downside of it is that I'm now, I think, tarnished for life in terms of how the YouTubes views my channel, and as such, I struggle to actually grow at the rate that some others do. Anyway. So maybe it was a robbing Peter and paying Paul situation. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, in terms of never mind any YouTube characters, never mind anything I'm doing at the time, is it underpinned by a person in the real world who was a senior academic for multiple decades, well published, taught in something like 10 different universities on 4 different continents? Yes. That is real. Anyway, sorry, carry on.
Yeah, okay. So I want to talk about calories because I know this keeps coming up. In one of your videos, well, I think I've got the quote here. So I believe you said this, you have to take in effectively more energy across the day than you're expending in order to store a significant amount of fat. And I was like, oh, wait, hang on, this doesn't sound what you said before. But then you said after that, I said energy there and not calories because they're not the same thing. So
Right.
can you explain the difference between an energy deficit and a calorie deficit?
Right. Okay. In the context that we're talking here, the difference would be that an effective energy deficit would be, in reality, what the actual physiological needs of the human were and how much they effectively did get, and versus how much they effectively did, for want of a better term, burn or use. The calorie is a gauge, it's a measurement tool, it's an estimate on physiological so-called energy, both intake and expense. Precisely because the calorie is absolutely explicitly defined as a measurement of heat energy by the very virtue of the piece of kit that you use to measure the thing. And the assumption that you're left to make is that the measurement of heat energy can be deemed to be equivalent to some unit of effective energy use by a human body. Well, we're not bomb calorimeters. That's not how we keep ourselves alive with food. Actually, what it turns out, I've been looking into this more and more. What's really fascinating here is that it seems like the human body is more an entropy-based machine than an energy-based machine, because, you know, energy is conserved and all that anyway. So the same amount of energy that goes into your body will leave your body at some point, but it will leave that body at a higher state of entropy than what it arrived in. So that's interesting. So we're not even really looking for energy. We're looking for some substrate that we can entropy up some. That's working on quite a level of abstraction, but there you go. The problem with a calorie, as derived from reading the label on the nutrition label on something, oh, there's 200 calories in this, whatever. Before we even go any further than that, at that step right there, that number is legally allowed to be out by a factor of 20%, plus or minus. A 40% range of error is allowable legally on that label as to how much or how many calories are in it, that thing that is being sold to you in that packet.
I guess a common argument from there is that if you eat the same thing like all the time, even if the calories are like inaccurate, if you like then take a little bit out and then your weight starts to go down, then you're probably in an energy deficit.
The interesting thing is that the only way that you can change your body weight is by changing your body mass. You can't change your body weight by changing your body's energetic status. So you can't say you are shorter, you have less weight now because you had less energy, because there isn't necessarily the cause and effect linkage there that you would imagine should be there.
Okay, it's converting.
Let me explain that. Remember how I said a calorie is a measurement of energy and heat energy explicitly? The thing that is actually being detected is an interaction with some incoming photons. Those photons having been released when the food sample was rapidly combusted using a very, very large electrical voltage, current to pass through it, vaporize the stuff, water, carbon dioxide, some ash, and these photons. Yeah. You know what the rest mass of a photon is?
The mass?
The rest mass of a photon?
Pretty much zero, isn't it?
Exactly zero, in fact. None at all. So no amount of exuding photons or indeed absorbing photons is going to change your weight on a scale. because they don't have any mass. You have to change your actual mass. And the only way to do that is to convert food, which is in a non-volatile form, say carbohydrates, fats, protein, sometimes alcohol, and your body takes those food items and chemically interacts them and changes things around a bit, and the end results chemically are H2O plus CO2. CO2 is volatile and will be breathed out of the lungs, and that CO2 gas had a mass, it had a weight, and that is the weight that your body loses. Further to that, the water that's produced adds to your body water pool and remains in your body for an indeterminate period of time until you urinate that out, sweat it out, it comes out in your tears, it comes out in your saliva, insensible losses, this vapor at the lungs when you're breathing, etc. And that is how that mass leaves your body. None of those things have anything to do with energy.
Right, okay. But those things have come from, say, the fat stores in your body, but it's been like converted, is that right?
Well, if your body is burning fat, for want of a better term, at the moment, at this time, it will be because there will be a set of instructions, a set of switches, if you like, in the body, set in a certain way as to tell the body that what it's doing now is breaking down stored fat and oxidizing that. Flick some of those switches back the other way, and that whole juggernaut of fat being used to produce so-called energy screeches to a halt and starts rolling back the other way, and you start storing fat. There's no in between. There's only kind of two gears. It's a crash box in terms of the metabolism and what it's geared to be doing. It's either geared to build up stores or to break them down. I guess that's what I'm saying.
Anabolism and catabolism, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So calories are essentially, the reason you don't like them is because they're kind of like an estimation of the amount of energy in food, not actually how much there is. Is that kind of the crux of it?
It's not so much about what I like and what I don't like. It's about communicating accurately and scientifically with people as possible, but also doing that in an intriguing way, in a kind of idiosyncratic way, in a way that grabs someone that has a hook. And they start thinking about what I'm saying and thinking, damn it, he's right at the end of the day. And then I've educated you by subterfuge. And that's kind of how I work more so these days. And so I guess the distinction is that the message I'm really trying to get across to people is there's no way to gauge, really, in an accurate way, what you genuinely, in effect, are taking in and what is leaving your body in a way that would be usable to you to predictably change your body composition, unless what you do is reduce your total food intake by a significant margin below what you are doing now baseline. The reason why you need to drop it so much is because of all that fuzziness, all that error that I've just been kind of alluding to. So you've got to undercut all of that to say, if you eat this many calories, then predictably you're going to lose some weight. Fat is what we really mean by that. What we have to do is then generally we have to undercut somebody's intakes by 500 of these so-called calories per day, and we have to do that for weeks on end, which is stressful to the body, sets off a bad series of hormone reactions that we don't want going on, and is altogether not the way to approach it. It's also subjects that person to the likelihood of nutritional insufficiency and all sorts of other issues. Much better to advise a person to eat a species-appropriate, species-specific diet, which will lead them naturally for their body to normalize according to genetic instruction. Nobody is genetically programmed to be overweight or unwell in that way metabolically.
Yeah. Okay. So
it's about decisions that people make.
On a previous occasion, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe you said you ate something like 6,000 quote calories per day for about 2 weeks and lost weight. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, that was one of the things I was throwing around to demonstrate how poor the calories in, calories out as a predictable means of adjusting your body composition is. It's wildly inaccurate. All sorts of things affect what happens to your body mass, your body weight, and the calories in, calories out model fails entirely to appreciate that your endocrine hormonal system inflammasome is all involved in a very very big way. So what happened was I did this thing called priming, where I was eating altogether too much food being meat and fat only, no carbohydrates. 6,500 so-called calories it was, I think, from memory, plus or minus whatever, for 2 weeks solid. And yeah, I was down about 15, I think it was 15 kilograms in that 2 week period.
30 something pounds.
Most of that was water. No two ways about it. Most of that weight that came off my body was water, and it was water that my body was holding because of inflammation. However, there was some fat that came off as well.
Okay.
My muscle weight and skeletal weight was unchanged according to the scanner that I used for that purpose.
Yeah. Okay. So the question I had from that was, some people trying to like bulk up or whatever and build muscle, if you're losing weight eating 6,000 quote calories a day, how does someone gain weight, you know, like on carnivore diet? Because would they have to go even higher than that, or are you saying that they'll kind of normalize? Well,
first of all, that person's body, their metabolism has to be in build up gear. They have to be anabolic in nature. So if they want to gain weight, mostly that's because they want to gain muscle mass. So are they doing hypertrophy training? Are they doing something that would cause their body to be in a mode where it would be adding on muscle mass? If not, then expecting muscles to miraculously grow just because you're overfeeding yourself would seem to be a bit short-sighted. Because what your body will actually do with excess protein, if you're just feeding yourself more and more and more and more, is it generally will turn that into sugar, and then that sugar will either be used immediately or then stored as fat if it's not used immediately.
But say this person was even, I guess, eating like half of that or like less than half of that. Are you saying that the body will almost kind of, on this diet, will naturalize to a good composition, essentially?
These days I have to think very little about the makeup of my meals. It comes naturally. I have to think very little about how much food do I want. Unless, like, I'm asked, oh, how hungry are you today? I'm like, oh, I never know the answer to that. Just put it in front of me, and when I feel full, I'll stop eating, sort of thing. So I've got a visual idea of how much meat would be a meal for me, and how much fat it should look like there is there, and if it isn't, do something about it, sort of thing. And I start eating when I feel hungry, and I stop eating when I get that sense that, oh, I'm quite full now. And I eat once a day, and that's served me well for a number of years now.
But from the perspective of, like, say you're overweight versus underweight, like, you're saying the calories don't matter so much. It's more that if you're eating the proper diet, that your hormones and other systems, etc., will kind of calibrate you to this.
Yes, I see what you're getting at. Yes, what happens over time, and it depends how inflamed a person's system is, but over time that inflammation will wane on a species-appropriate, species-specific diet that will become much better. Fat will tend to melt off that person's frame. They will tend to eat according to their hunger and satiety signaling, provided they are not eating carbohydrate-based things. Carbohydrates destroy your hunger and satiety signaling function. So that's why it's one of the many reasons they need to go, actually. And yes, that person can expect over time that their body composition will normalize, optimize, and head back towards the genetically predetermined ideal for that person. A lot of people say, well, how long does it take? And I said, well, how long did it take you to mess your health up? You know, there's some of them, it's multiple decades. And I'm like, well, hopefully we can get you back quicker than that, but I'm not guaranteeing you anything. You know? So, yeah.
Okay. I heard this kind of quote from somewhere. I'll change it because it says calories right now, but it's energy in, energy out works, but you have to take into the fact that energy in affects energy out, and energy in affects energy in. What do you think about that?
It sounds cryptic, doesn't it? It sounds a bit apocryphal, maybe even. Basically, the amount of energy that enters your body and the amount of energy that exits your body, at some point, in the end, all evens out. In the short term, you can store some of the food that you eat as physical matter, as mass, as molecules of fat on your body. But you're not storing energy, because the energy only exists when you release it.
Okay.
It's potentially energy before that, because it's actually not energy, is it? It's in the form of mass.
Right, okay. So, yeah.
And actually the only way to get so-called energy out of that mass is to take the chemical bonds, the carbon skeletons, the hydrogens connected to those carbon skeletons, and chemically interact those with some enzymes that make what we want to happen. But let's do it in stages, and a bunch of different enzymes, so that we can capture the energy along the way and use that so-called Gibbs-free energy in order to spin the H0, H1 ATPase in the mitochondria, for example.
Yeah. What I guess I'm trying to say is, from what you've said there, it sounds like the energy balance thing does work, but it's just very complicated and it's hard to take into account all the factors. But if you could take into account the hormones and the other things that affect the rate at which you're using energy, then it does seem to work.
Okay.
But you're saying it's not really plausible for most people to do that.
The concept, you can say it boils, at the end of the day, at the most abstract level, it boils down to energy in, energy out. Or you can say calories in, calories out, if you like. Or you can do what I'm preferring nowadays and talking about mass in, mass out in various forms. But at the end of the day, there is no real utility, is what I'm saying. Because you at home, me at home, Joe Blogs down the street at home, cannot get anywhere near accurately assessing how many so-called calories I am consuming. Neither can I get anywhere near a good estimate of how many I'm so-called spending or using.
Okay. Yeah.
So if you can't measure how many are coming in or how many are going out, what's the point of banging on about this? Oh, it all boils down to calories in, calories out in the end. Well, great, but that's of no value to us.
Yeah, I see your
That's what
point.
I'm saying.
Okay. Yeah, all right.
So what I'm saying is the important thing for people to understand is what you should do, take home. If, let's say you are overweight in terms of fat, Let's say you're over fat. Let's call it what it is. It's a spade. It's not an offensive word, fat. It's just a word. Let's say you're fat and you want to be less fat. What should you do? Okay, in my mind, track nothing, measure nothing, including your own body weight on a scale, by the way. Don't measure out your food. Don't do any of that kind of stuff. What you want to do is eat a species-appropriate, species-specific diet, which is 100% carnivore, based on the muscle meat of large ruminant animals, not the organs, the muscle meat, and the associated fat. Plus or minus dairy, if you like, plus or minus eggs, if you like, they're great. You know, all the rest of the animals are great too, in maybe up to 20% of the total diet, but most of it's beef. That seems to be the way to approach it. Start eating when you're feeling hungry. Stop eating when you're not feeling hungry anymore. Inflammation melts away, so does the fat over a period of time. Don't have to track anything, measure anything, or tell any computer programs anything about anything you're doing. It's great. That said, do not change your diet from what it is to anything different from that overnight in a big way. Oh, I saw this bloke talking about carnivore on the interwebs today, and I thought it was a good idea. So tomorrow I'm going to go carnivore because he said go carnivore, it's a great thing. Yes, do go carnivore, but not tomorrow. Take 6 to 8 weeks to ramp yourself down. Yeah. If you change your diet radically, hugely overnight, what you are going to do is upset your microbiome and all hell is going to break loose. You don't want that.
Yeah, I heard this may be a bit of an extreme example, but I believe it's vegans and zinc. They can't really digest large amounts of meat if they've been vegan for a while.
Right. Wouldn't surprise me.
Okay. So you mentioned before carbs destroy hunger satiety signaling. But I think I have heard you say that you don't always want to be in ketosis, but the way you like to, I guess, kind of bump out of it every now and then is you eat like a solid amount of protein in one go. Can you talk about that, please?
Yeah, it's a good idea to pretty much daily to experience a period of a couple of hours where nominally you are nudged out of the ketogenic pathway and there is some gluconeogenesis occurring. There is a small amount of insulinogenic action going on in your body. Now we're talking about sleeping policemen here in the line. We're not talking about one of those great big spikes you get from eating carbs. So just that sleeping policeman is what you need basically daily. What that does is several things. It affects the kidney tissue in such a way as to allow that kidney tissue to maintain its integrity, to act as a filter for electrolytes. If you don't have that little bump in your insulin profile every day, your kidney will start to leak out your electrolytes, and it will get worse and worse and worse the longer you are solidly in ketosis.
This is what people said Saladino might have been suffering from.
Yeah, absolutely. In my mind, yes. Now he was eating a lot of meat, but it wasn't enough for his age, stage, body size, and activity levels. I would suggest. Also, he may have been compounding it, I suspect, by eating some carbohydrates well before he owned up to actually eating some carbohydrates. Added to that, I believe that he was probably in quite a toxic situation with copper, and I think he probably still is, because anytime you freeze dry concentrate the livers of animals down in huge amounts and eat huge amounts of that as a supplement that's supposed to be good for you, well, you're asking for a toxic overload of copper, because copper is very, very highly expressed in liver tissue. You shouldn't overdo it with liver. Liver is fine in small amounts. Relative to the amount of a beast that is liver, that's the proportion of your diet that should contain liver if you must.
Yeah.
But there is no requirement for you to eat liver.
Probably like 1 or 2%.
So, and liver is yucky. That's the science. Trust me on the science. You can take that home. Yucky is a scientific word.
Yeah. So, yeah, so you said that carbs kind of mess with the hunger signaling, and
Yeah.
I guess some people say this is like, oh, because when you would have found carbs in the wild or whatever, you would have just been like, okay, let's just eat as much as possible because we don't know when we're going to get it again.
Yeah.
I know that the common argument is that the fruits that we have today are very different and a lot more sugary than they would have been. But what do you think of this kind of idea of carbohydrates every now and then as a sign of abundance? I know Dr. Jack Kruse talks about kind of in summer he'll eat some carbs, but then in winter he'll be more like carnivore. Do you think there's any merit to that?
Yes, so long as some carbs is still a very, very low level of carbs and probably compressed into a short period of maybe a couple of weeks.
Okay.
As in what would be happening right at the end of the autumn/fall time, just before you're heading into winter, when the berries and fruits are ready and ripe. Sure. Whether or not it's necessary, I don't think there's any question that it is necessary. It's not necessary is what I'm saying. It's something that some people think might be a tweak. But then as soon as you start saying, well, here's a reason why some carbs is handy, then suddenly you'll find those people making excuses for why more carbs than that is better. And then you come back a few months later and even more carbs is better than that. And Saladino is up to 400 grams a day now, by the way. Okay. 400 grams a day is what he's indicating as good. And he's still calling himself carnivore or meat-based, animal-based. I'm like, oh, yeah, okay. I say that's cool.
I think he has eased off recommending that to everyone as of recently, perhaps because of some of your videos. I think he now says based on your activity level, something like this.
Right. Isn't it amazing how many people take things from me and then don't credit me for it? I should do a Frank Tufano, shouldn't I? Be all upset about it. Or I should actually be pleased that people are listening to what I've had to say and adopting it and putting it into their own lexicon and spreading it forth, because actually that's what we're looking for, maybe.
Okay. So, okay, I got a question about the Randle cycle. So.
Oh, good. Yes, my favorite.
Yeah. So from my current this is a very basic understanding, but it's your body likes to continue to burn, quote, the energy source, carbohydrate or fat that you've previously been using. So once the cells become saturated with carbohydrate, they shut the door to carbohydrate and fat. So you'll have, well, depending on how much you ate, but you'll have free fatty acids in the blood. Whereas if you've been burning fat, the cells get oversaturated with fat, they shut the door, you've got more blood sugar. The key thing I always seem to hear you say was this: all the cells are oversaturated with energy. How much kind of fat and carbohydrate would it take to saturate your cells, I suppose? Because some people could argue that, oh, well, if I'm just eating a little bit, then I'm not going to oversaturate it, and then it's not going to cause problems.
Yeah. Okay. So using a model, a hypothetical model, where let's say the skeletal muscle mass is the largest user of what's getting fed up to it, and then your brain second place at 20% of the so-called energy that's going through in terms of the foods being oxidized to energy sort of thing. Remind me of the question, Owen, sorry.
So how much carbohydrate and fat is necessary to saturate all of the cells with energy?
Right. It depends on the energetic state of the cells. And using that model where you've got skeletal muscles using most of your energy, let's say the most important effect is what you would note in skeletal muscles. So if you are using a lot of energy, then you'll be able to move a lot more substrate through to subserve those energy needs than if you were using less energy. And so the mixture that would saturate that cell would be completely different under those two different circumstances.
How much are we talking though, roughly? Is it like, can really active people get away with 100 grams of carbs a day and not overflow into the bloodstream with the excess sugar? Or
well, yes, there are people who are consuming 100 grams of carbohydrates and not overtly putting on fat because they are using up those carbohydrates to produce energy oxidatively. But that doesn't mean they are getting away with it. No, because they will be suffering the glycation damage of having been exposed to those sugars.
Right. Okay.
And that damage will come back to bite them at some point.
Can you talk more about the glycation then? That's when the sugar is kind of reacting with molecules, right? Kind of gumming things up.
Yep, that's it. So sugar binds chemically to proteins, fat, other physical components of your body, and they start to chemically derange those proteins and fats and twist things around and make them so they don't work very well, etc. And the worse it gets, basically. Yeah. So someone who's got a lot of damage by having a lot of sugar molecules appended where they ought not to be will be someone who would be overtly aged or aging rapidly and have other symptomologies of, not being at the top of their game.
Okay. And where is that occurring? Is that in the bloodstream when the sugar overflows from the Randle cycle, or?
Wherever the sugar can get to, it will do damage. That's, as you've just identified, that is the primary reason for the existence of the Randle cycle in terms of the evolutionary pressure leading to it. I.e., sure, we're going to pour in sugar when we can get it, because we can get it very rarely as a human. That's how it was. What we need to do is protect the cells from being inundated with sugar, which will destroy them. And instead, that excess sugar that's taken in the form of those fruits, etc., a few weeks a year goes basically straight to fat storage.
As a survival advantage, it would have been.
Yeah, we store that sugar that we've got as fat, and we carry it around with us as fat, and then when we want to use it, it gets burned as fat.
In the winter.
But nonetheless, it's the storage of the energy for a period of time in the form of the mass that carries that so-called potential energy. But don't forget, the energy doesn't exist until it's released.
Okay, yeah.
That's another reason why a calorie is not very good, because the amount of energy released by that chemical reaction is not the same as the amount that's being captured to produce ATP. There is some wastage.
Okay.
Entropy losses.
Yeah.
Again, with the making things more entropic. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I think people would say, and I think you'd agree with this, that you have a very high standard of evidence. Some would even say a bit too high in certain instances. How can you then say things like sugar is kind of toxic to the body, and we don't need any fiber, and seed oils are contraindicated? How do you kind of reconcile that? Because we haven't locked twins in labs or whatever for 20 years. Right.
Okay. So first of all, when you talk about the scientific standard, it's not my standard. It's the standard. I don't make the rules on what the standard of proof, cause, and effect is.
Yeah. Okay. So
when
people say
there is no evidence which can causally link X with Y, I'm saying that because I have read the literature very carefully over decades, and I know that in substance, in total, there is no evidence for X causing Y. That's why I said that. When I say sugar is toxic is any effect that can be thought of as the body is being poisoned in some way. And a lot of people say, and the dose makes the poison. Yes, that's true, and it's also true with sugar. And sugar molecules, the toxic effect is they start to chemically bind up on your tissues and destroy the function of those tissues. So that's the toxic effect. That's why sugar is a toxin.
So
over the level that you require it. At the right level, it keeps you alive. Without it, you're going to die. But as soon as the level of sugar in your system starts going above your normal natural level, now you're in trouble. Now it's a toxin.
How do we know? How do we know? I'm not saying that we don't know it, but how do we know that sugar does this glycation?
Because samples taken from different animals, including humans, in various different studies over the years, it's a well-known phenomenon that we see these tissues with these extra sugar molecules appended to them. We can chemically test for them. We can see that they're there using microscope studies and things. We can see the damage. This is a mechanism of aging and physical damage and toxicity that is demonstrated with a mechanism which is sound enough that you can go, okay, so you eat too much sugar and it's likely that your body will be damaged by exposure to that toxin. Fine. In the same way that we don't have a cause and effect on that even, it's a pretty good inference though. I mean, you can say the same thing about cigarette smoking. You could say there's no evidence that cigarette smoking causes lung cancer.
Yeah.
Cause and effect, which is correct. There isn't. However, the inference is pretty damn strong.
Yeah.
It's really strong. Whereas, the inferences that you find in epidemiological studies in nutrition are weak, really weak at best.
Yeah. I would just play devil's advocate. I know some people would say, if we look at like autopsies or whatever and find like cholesterol in people's arteries, they might say, oh, look, see, this is causing this.
Okay, there are several things you could say to that straight away. Number one, do you know how much of your average atherosclerotic plaque is made up of cholesterol once they excise that lesion from a deceased person and work out by mass and by volume and all of that, how much of that issue, that lesion, how much of it is cholesterol?
I think it's like 10 or 20%, something like that. It's less than half.
No, it's less than 1/10 of 1%.
Okay.
Most of the rest of it is scar tissue and thromboses and other cells and bits and bobs, immune cells, etc. So there's very, very little cholesterol there. And that cholesterol which is there is probably there, I would surmise, precisely in order to attempt to heal from the injury that cell was experiencing. Given that we're talking about the damage to the cell membranes of the epithelial cells, that's what atherosclerosis is, you would suspect that the cell membranes would want to be repaired by those cells. And 50% of those cell membranes by weight and by volume is cholesterol. So you would need the raw material of cholesterol there so that you could start repairing the damaged tissue. So I would suggest that's why it is there in any amount. Suggesting that because it is there, it is the cause of the problem is absolutely anti-science. I've never heard anything further away from science than that, just about. It's like turning on the television, seeing footage of a major forest fire and watching firemen scurrying around saying, look, it's those firemen again.
Okay, so I guess another way of looking at this is LDL is necessary but not sufficient. I've heard some people say that the LDL needs to be damaged, either glycated or oxidized, to start this process. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Native LDL is not problematic, or it's not thought to be problematic. There's no mechanism by which it would be.
Because what I see a lot of, I guess, Western classic medicine or whatever, they're just focusing on like smashing down LDL, whereas I feel like people in the carnivore space are more talking about how do we remove the glycation and oxidation which is causing this.
Yeah.
I mean, Paul Saladino, to give him credit, I got this from him, he was kind of saying like it's like having wood and then a spark. It's like just taking away the wood from your house to try and stop a fire. you might as well just take away the thing that's causing the spark.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Coffee. I want to talk about coffee because I see some carnivores drinking coffee saying, oh, this is fine. There might be some benefits. And then I know I spoke to Chafee, and Anthony Chafee said that he doesn't like coffee, and he sometimes sees that that can be kind of stopping people from reaching success that they want with their diet. Where do you stand on coffee? Because I know I have seen you drink it a couple of times, but you kind of said, drink water, do what I say, not what I do.
I used to be a very, very heavy coffee drinker, very heavy. And in recent times, I've brought that right back to the point where I'm now a much more moderate user of coffee, like in a reasonable range. I have 2 or 3 cups on a heavy coffee drinking day and 1 or none on a no coffee drinking day. Coffee is a recreational drug. It's a stimulant. It's also a toxin and above certain levels. It has toxic effects. There is no place for it in the diet. There is no dietary requirement for it. There's no recommended daily allowance of coffee. It's not a food. It is a recreational drug. And it's a choice that people make as to whether or not they're going to drink coffee and how much. You will find that there's a certain level of coffee that your body can, for want of a better term, tolerate, and there's no obvious effect on your health status going forward. But when you cross that threshold in coffee consumption, things will crap out really rapidly.
Okay. So you think most people can, I don't know about most people, but people can drink a bit and be okay?
Yeah. I mean, people can smoke 20 a day and live to 100 as well, though. People are amazing in their resilience.
Yeah. But people would be better with less or none if possible.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So, right, okay. So back to gluconeogenesis and glycation. I believe somewhere I've heard 4 grams of carbohydrate is like the kind of safe limit before we start to go overboard. Can gluconeogenesis cause glycation in any appreciable amount?
I don't really think so, no. And the reason I say that is because the effect that you get from these gluconeogenic amino acids is so much smaller than anything that you could achieve using carbs. It would just be impossible to eat that much protein. I mean, good luck. You just can't raise your blood sugar appreciably.
Okay. What do you make of a lot of these anti-aging doctors recently talking about, well, not even just talking, like have an obsession over mTOR, and that we need to reduce our protein intake because we're going to be increasing mTOR and we're going to get cancer and all of this?
Right. mTOR exists for a reason. It is encoded for by a series of genes. It is a sensor for the level of certain amino acids, most notably. It needs to be activated at various times and act as a sensor. The issue is, or the proposed issue is, that you don't want, they say, you don't want mTOR activated chronically all the time, because that might, by some mechanism, lead to carcinogenesis, they're saying. They are mostly David Sinclair. Actually, that's who they is mostly in terms of aging. David Sinclair's work is okay for what it is. He is a scientist working in a reductionist field. He is looking at X versus Y. He's focusing on that. His findings are not necessarily transferable to an intact, free living person.
He does seem to get excited by rodent studies.
He's very, very sure of himself, which, okay, he's been a very successful academic. However, he seems to have either forgotten, abandoned, or perhaps never had the scientific discipline to keep his commentary to within the realms of what his data can support. He's, as you said, he gets pretty excited about the stuff. It's his reason d'etre, though. So whatever. That's how he makes his living. We all have something to sell.
Okay. We'll start to round up here, but I heard you say that people need to kind of accept Darwinian evolution as a fact, but that doesn't negate the possibility of a creator before that. Do you think, like, yeah, okay, what were we going to say about that? Were we going to say something there? Or I was going to say,
No?
What are your thoughts on that? Do you think there was a creator before, or do you not really think about it?
Well, it's a tough one to answer, because at the end of the day, what is reality itself has, with modern science, has become a construct. Reality itself has become a construct. It's not an actual thing. It has no power of its own. So it's very, very possible that there's a lot going on that we don't understand. Like, okay, well, so we're asked to believe that at one point there was absolutely nothing, no space, no time, no matter, no energy. And then suddenly, for some inexplicable reason, there was this, what they're going to call a Big Bang, which, given that there was no space and no air for a bang to travel through, it was neither big nor a bang. Good naming. Well done. Inflation of the universe, suddenly expansion of this infinitely small singularity with all the energy, all the matter, all the everything contained somehow in no space at all, and then suddenly expanding out to make space and fill it with its own magnificence. That's what the physics tells us, the Big Bang Theory. I've simplified that a great deal, I understand. For those of you who are physicists, don't come and crucify me on that. But is that very different from reading the Bible that says, and God said, let there be light?
I wouldn't say so.
Okay, so don't take the time frames in the Bible for absolute, because if people have said, oh no, the earth is 7,000 years old or whatever it is, I don't even know that number, but based on, they had a look at the list of who begot who and who begets who and who begets who, and they've worked it back. So, look, 7,000 years ago, that's when God said, let there be light. Well, maybe the Bible is a collection of ideas, thematically consistent or otherwise, as it turns out, from place to place. Maybe it's words written on transcripts by humans over the years. Maybe it's not the inviolate word of God. Who knows? Maybe the construct, I guess, is sound of what the book says, but let's not take it as a literal translation of the story of the earth, because science tells us the earth is a great deal older than 7,000 years old. There's no question of that. But that doesn't preclude there being some parallel truth in different ways of looking at the same, reality, the universe. Yeah.
I'd agree with that.
I don't know. That's the very long answer. The short answer is I really don't know.
You said...
If something suddenly did happen like that, well, why? What made that happen?
You said in there that reality has kind of become a construct.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that? And when you say that, do you mean it used to not be a construct and now it is?
Well, many generations ago, a person could pick up a rock and No, I cannot pass my hand through this rock. It is solid. It is real. It exists. And then several hundred years later, we've done a bunch of physics and maths to show absolutely the only way what we observe could possibly be correct is if we don't in fact exist. And actually what all there is perception. Because everything that takes up any space and has any mass is made up of particles that don't.
Yeah. That's why I wonder when people drill down so much like calories and stuff, like from what I understand, the more we zoom in, everything just kind of falls apart and shouldn't actually work, but it kind of somehow does.
People that tend to want to boil things down to the lowest common denominator and say, here is your take-home catchphrase. Calories in, calories out, it works, they say. You just need to work it. No, that's nonsense. We've been talking at length as to many of the reasons why it doesn't. So yeah, I think it really is people that really don't actually have a grasp on something, trying to claim an authority on that thing, and it becomes about parroting a false paradigm or model.
People also get excited about mechanisms, but the body is extremely complex, and you can kind of, well, it seems at least you can have another mechanism which could then negate the one you found that you think is like proof that everything that you've said works. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. I think that's pretty much it, Bart. I appreciate you taking the time. This has been really interesting.
Cool. Nice to meet you.
Where can people support you, find you online?
Best thing to do is to go directly to my main YouTube channel, which from within the YouTube is just go at Bart-Kay, Bart-Kay. That'll take you to my main channel. All my other channels are linked under every single one of my videos in the show notes, as is the one-stop shop for contacting me, getting consults, buying merchandise, etc., etc. It's that bit.ly link that you'll find in the show notes under every one of my videos. So there you go. If you want to email me, you can. It might take me a while to get back to you because I get a few emails, but my email address is on the About tab on my YouTube channel. So that's all the ways you can get hold of me. I'm also on IG a bit. You can find me there if you want. And that's about it.
Okay. Awesome. Thanks, Bart. Have a good rest of your day.
Yeah. My pleasure.
Goodbye.
All right. Yeah.